Keanu Reeves stood in the spacious waiting hall of a railway station, blending seamlessly into the crowd. Dressed in a simple black t-shirt and dark jeans, he looked like an ordinary traveler waiting for his train amid the bustling commotion. But on this day, an ordinary wait turned into a series of events that no one could have predicted. No one imagined how his quiet presence would change the fate of those around him. And most importantly, within a few hours, word of what happened would spread everywhere, because no one expected him to take on the role of defender and mentor. Friends, before we immerse ourselves in this incredible story, please support our channel. If you enjoy watching the good deeds of remarkable people and appreciate sincere, inspiring stories, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, and share your comments. Sometimes, just one word from you can change someone's life. The waiting hall was always filled with the hum of voices, distant announcements of trains arriving and departing, and the soft light filtering through large windows. Keanu wasn't trying to draw attention to himself. He stood by a column, occasionally glancing at the electronic schedule. People around him bustled about, some hugged their loved ones excitedly, others waited impatiently for boarding. And amid this urban chaos, something unusual began to unfold. Not far from Keanu stood a man in his 40s, with a stern face and sharp features. He seemed on the verge of boiling over with anger. In front of him was another man, slightly older, with a weary expression and tired eyes. Next to that man was a young boy, clinging tightly to his father's hand. The child's gaze darted between his father and the stranger, who was clearly ready to speak his mind. Then the antagonist, this angry stranger, took a step forward. "How long do I have to wait?" he snapped at the boy's father. "Don't you see you're blocking the way? If you can't control your kid, then he needs to stay put and stop getting under people's feet." The father flushed with embarrassment but couldn't muster a firm reply. He only whispered, telling his son to stand closer to the wall. The boy looked at the stranger with undisguised anxiety, realizing that he was the reason for this man's irritation. People nearby noticed the outburst, but most preferred to remain bystanders. Keanu, however, listened intently to every word. At that moment, the antagonist still didn't realize who the quiet man in the black t-shirt standing a short distance away actually was. Nor did anyone else suspect just how significant this modest presence would turn out to be. Tension was rising, but before the antagonist's anger could fully ignite, it's important to understand what the father of the boy was feeling. He hated conflict, being somewhat shy. Right away, old memories flashed in his mind. Once, in his youth, he had been bullied, shamed for coming from a poor family and not affording fancy clothes. He felt a bitter déjà vu. Once again, he was small and vulnerable, just as he had been years ago. The father of the boy looked at the aggressor and murmured in a low voice, "I'm sorry. We really didn't mean to get in anyone's way. We'll just find a spot where we don't bother anyone." Hearing this, the boy shrank further, as though under the stranger's scorching glare. The antagonist snorted. "It's too late now. Your brat was running all over the hall. Yeah, you're an adult, but apparently can't even watch your own son." His words oozed frustration. He seemed to be releasing pent-up anger, perhaps from exhaustion or personal troubles, unleashing it on the first person he encountered. In a busy station, it's not unusual for such heated exchanges to flare up, but this time, Keanu was there, witnessing everything. Among the bustling crowd, only Keanu's expression became more serious. He didn't rush to intervene, hoping the situation might resolve on its own. He knew that stepping in too soon might escalate things. But when he heard the cruel tone, he realized he couldn't remain silent. A nearby loudspeaker announced the arrival of a certain express train, and the crowd stirred around them, gathering luggage. Suddenly, the boy, who had been standing by his father, took a cautious step forward and softly spoke to the antagonist. I just wanted to watch the trains. I find them really interesting." But the man didn't even look at the child. He continued, "You think I don't know kids are curious? The problem isn't you, it's that your father can't teach you to behave." Hearing this, Tears welled up in the boy's eyes, and the father felt a surge of anger mixed with humiliation. He wanted to say something but was too flustered. At that moment, Keanu gently broke into the conversation. "Excuse me, may I help? It seems there's been a misunderstanding." The antagonist turned toward Keanu and, not recognizing him, directed his aggression at him. "And who do you think you are? Another defender? Go on your way if you don't want to get involved." Keanu replied calmly, almost in a whisper, "I can see you're upset. But is it necessary to take it out on a child and his father? Yes, it's crowded, and that's inconvenient, but maybe there's a more peaceful way to resolve the problem." The man narrowed his eyes, sizing up Keanu for any weak points. At a glance, there weren't any, just an ordinary guy, nothing special, maybe somewhat athletic, standing tall. But definitely not important enough to warrant respect. "Look at him," the antagonist continued, turning to people walking by, trying to gather an audience. "He thinks just because he's speaking calmly, he can lecture me. He doesn't even know who he's dealing with. Maybe I'm the one who knows how to raise kids, and he doesn't. Maybe I pay taxes, and they're just taking up space here." His statements were rambling, a flimsy attempt at justifying his anger. Keanu merely listened carefully, not raising his voice, and that self-control began to irritate the antagonist even more. The boy's father glanced up, noticing that someone in the crowd seemed to recognize Keanu. A woman off to the side covered her mouth with her hand, whispering to her companion, "Isn't that?" But the antagonist didn't hear any of this. "Listen," Keanu brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "I'm not here to teach or offend you, but I'm asking, the child hasn't done anything to hurt you. Could you let them move to that bench, so they don't disturb you?" The antagonist was about to retort when he noticed a few people in line for boarding looking curiously at Keanu, as though some recognized him. Yet, the angry man hadn't grasped why they were suddenly so interested. That's how the confrontation began, gradually escalating. The boy's father timidly thanked Keanu for standing up for them, while his son wiped away tears, clinging closer to him. Normally, the antagonist might have just brushed off the little family, but now that this nosy stranger had interfered, the conflict was intensifying. The station was charged with the feeling that something bigger than a simple argument was about to happen. Keanu stood there like a solid wall, prepared to take the brunt of the man's anger, just to protect those who couldn't defend themselves. He understood how one steady, confident voice could nip injustice in the bud. For a brief moment, the antagonist narrowed his eyes, as though trying to figure out something. Perhaps he was a bit thrown off by Keanu's calm yet firm presence. Or maybe he wanted to appear as some kind of hero to onlookers. Trying to save face, he snorted. "All right, if you want to stick up for them, go ahead. But don't forget, I won't let anyone tell me what to do. I'm tired and short on time, and he nodded toward the father and child, took up all this space. I don't care who it is, some movie star or a conductor, if they're in my way, I'll call them out." He said movie star sarcastically, with no real direction. At that, a few people around started whispering more actively, pointing at Keanu. However, the antagonist still didn't understand who stood before him. Keanu noticed that the crowd was growing curious, so he slightly lowered his head, still trying to stay a regular guy of the people. In his heart, he hated seeing anyone suffer injustice, but he didn't want this to turn into a "look at me, I'm a celebrity, I can do whatever I want" show. He chose the more humble approach. The father of the boy sighed and quietly said to Keanu, "I'm sorry if I'm causing trouble. I really didn't mean." "You're not to blame," Keanu replied kindly. "Sometimes people are angry not because of what we do, but because they have a lot of pain and resentment inside themselves." His words resonated with the father, who still harbored painful memories of bullying. Old wounds were torn open. Once again, he saw a person pressing all the right buttons to assert superiority. "Dad," the boy spoke up, glancing at Keanu. "Is this man really mad at us? I don't think so, Keanu smiled at the child. He's angry at himself and his own problems. Sometimes it's hard for people to handle their feelings. The antagonist overheard this and his face reddened. He saw it as ridicule. Keanu's calm tone infuriated him more than outright rudeness. "Don't act so high and mighty," he muttered through clenched teeth. "I'm not here for lectures. I've got a train soon, I need to rest, and they've ruined my mood." He took a loud breath, trying to draw as many eyes as possible, but the crowd's reaction was mixed. Some pitied him, assuming he was overtired. Others disapproved of his harshness. Still others watched Keanu curiously, sensing something unusual might happen. Things escalated quickly when the antagonist started mocking Keanu, sneering. "Oh, so you're trying to play the hero? Think that'll work? Or maybe you're one of those who pretend to be some good Samaritan just to film it and get internet views?" Some bystanders looked at Keanu sympathetically, while others felt unsure how to respond to such aggression. Keanu remained unruffled. "I'm not recording anyone," he said in a soft voice. "But I do care about what's happening. I can't just stand by when someone's in trouble." The antagonist was about to continue his tirade, but a woman in her 30s approached, recognizing Keanu immediately. Her eyes were filled with excitement. She tried to keep her voice down to avoid making the scene worse, but she couldn't hide her gratitude. "Excuse me, you're Keanu Reeves, right? Thank you for standing up for that child." Finally, the antagonist gave the woman his full attention. He looked back at Keanu, reevaluating his appearance. In that moment, recognition flickered in his eyes. All the details clicked into place: the face, the voice, the manner of speaking. Suddenly, he realized that the man he'd been ridiculing and insulting was a world-famous actor renowned for kindness and humility. Stunned, the antagonist's expression changed abruptly. He began to mumble excuses. Well, you understand. I'm just having a bad day, my nerves are shot." But it was too late. Everyone around had witnessed how drastically his tone changed. 1 second, he was yelling that no one could stop him, and now he was almost trying to appear like a misunderstood, good guy. His hypocrisy was plain to see. Keanu took a step closer and said gently, "I understand that everyone has tough days. But maybe you should have thought first before hurting these people. Their little boy did nothing to you, right?" The man lowered his eyes. He looked pathetically out of place, especially in front of someone with a global reputation for genuine kindness. Realizing it was Keanu Reeves only magnified his shame. The antagonist stammered, flushing under all those stares. "When we're overwhelmed by our own problems," Keanu continued, speaking as if only to him, "there are better ways to cope than taking it out on others. Kindness can start with a simple gesture. And that child is certainly innocent of whatever's troubling you." The man understood that anything he said now would determine how people saw him from here on out. His pride wouldn't let him back down easily. Though rattled, he tried to salvage the situation. "You know, of course, I didn't mean. I just never imagined it would escalate like this." The waiting hall fell silent. The father of the boy wasn't sure what to say. He felt relieved but still feared the antagonist might lash out again. The boy, sensing the support, gave Keanu a timid smile. Then, suddenly, a few people began clapping. Not as though it were a performance, but more an appreciative gesture for kindness and courage. Hearing the applause, the man who had just been raging a moment ago grew even more embarrassed. If it was just shyness, people might have forgiven him sooner, but it was the realization that he had been humiliating a person universally admired for compassion. Now his rudeness was on display for all to see. Can we stop arguing?" he mumbled, taking a step back. "It's just really been a rough day." Keanu nodded. "We all have our struggles. I don't want anyone looking down on you. I hope you'll think about this, because a child shouldn't bear the brunt of our stress." The antagonist blinked, possibly expecting Keanu to ridicule him or scold him. But Keanu remained calm. The boy, meanwhile, clung to his father and quietly said, "Dad, maybe we can go find a bench somewhere else?" The father nodded, relieved. He offered Keanu a shy look of gratitude. "Thank you so much. I never thought anyone would stand up for us. And especially, you." "No worries," Keanu replied with a gentle smile. Sometimes just a few words can change a lot. The antagonist, seeing everyone turn away from him and some casting disapproving glances, finally understood how foolish he now appeared. But instead of staying silent, he muttered, "So, I guess you all think I'm a monster now, huh?" Keanu shrugged. "No one's perfect. We learn from our mistakes. Maybe this is a lesson for you too." The man felt a pang of guilt. He seemed conflicted, lowering his gaze, then mustered the courage to quietly say, Sorry. I really lost my temper. I shouldn't have acted like that, especially in front of a kid." These words were barely audible but seemed sincere. As though a spark of humanity within him had surfaced beneath all the layers of bitterness and frustration. At that point, it looked like everything was winding down. However, this moment signaled the beginning of a chain of good deeds that many in the station wouldn't forget. An elderly woman nearby dropped her bag of groceries, and several people rushed over to help pick up the scattered items. A young couple who had been watching offered the boy their seat so he could rest. Another woman quietly approached the father to ask if they needed water or any assistance. Right before everyone's eyes, the atmosphere was transforming. It was as if, inspired by Keanu's example, people started showing more empathy toward one another. The antagonist observed all this in silence, clearly unsettled by the notion that he could have caused serious harm. Keanu stood aside, not trying to draw attention. He gave a faint smile, noticing how people's behavior was changing. After a moment, the antagonist found enough courage to approach Keanu again. I'm still a bit shaken," he admitted awkwardly. "I never imagined I'd run into someone famous like this." "I don't blame you for that," Keanu said. "But wouldn't it be great if you saw something good in people instead of venting anger? Kindness is contagious, as you can see." The man nodded, realizing he had nothing more to say. Some onlookers gazed at them again, as if they were witnessing the man's genuine moment of repentance. Meanwhile, the boy's father wrapped an arm around his son and whispered, "See, son. There's no need to hold a grudge against him. He probably has his own problems. The important thing is there are people like Mr. Reeves, right?" The boy smiled and, wiping away his remaining tears, asked, "Dad, is he really that actor you talked about?" The father nodded. And in that moment, he realized something profound was happening, for himself and for his child. The boy had witnessed how to respond when facing injustice, and also learned that even famous, wealthy people can be humble and willing to help in the most unexpected moment. The situation had settled, but Keanu wanted to be sure the boy and his father were okay. He came over, gently asking, "Are you all set with your tickets? Need help finding your platform?" The father, still honored by the attention, quickly declined. No, thank you. We know where we need to go. We're just waiting for our connection. Maybe, you'd like to sit with us, if you have time." Keanu smiled but shook his head politely. "Thank you for the offer, but I've got my own route to follow. I think we should let this story end quietly." The father gratefully shook Keanu's hand, and the boy, hesitating, reached out his own small hand to shake Keanu's. For a moment, Keanu was taken aback, then happily accepted the child's handshake. Around them, approving murmurs were heard. Someone snapped a photo. "I hope everything goes well for you," Keanu said, looking directly into the boy's eyes. "Remember, we can't control how others act, but we can control how we respond. Never be afraid to be polite and kind. Just then, the loudspeaker announced that Keanu's train was arriving at one of the platforms. Arrival of the train rang out, momentarily drowning the soft hum of conversation. People began heading to the turnstiles. Keanu prepared to leave but heard a quiet voice behind him. "Wait." It was the antagonist. He took a few steps closer, clearly uncertain, then awkwardly said, "Listen. I know I behaved terribly. If you can forgive me, maybe I can at least do something, buy the kid a drink or something." Keanu turned around. He was pleased to see genuine remorse in the man, though mixed with shame. "I think the best thing you can do," Keanu replied, "is the next time you feel frustrated or hurt, remember today and try to be kinder. You don't need to give gifts or money. Just be a bit better." A faint, embarrassed smile crossed the man's face. He exhaled deeply and nodded, not trusting himself to speak further. Perhaps this moment would spark real change in him. Finally, Keanu's train was announced. He walked toward the turnstiles, silently hoping the family and that impulsive man would emerge from this a bit kinder. Behind him, someone called out, "Thank you, Mr. Reeves." He didn't need to turn around to know it was an earnest note of gratitude, likely from the family or from any of the witnesses now inspired to do good. As he boarded the train, Keanu glanced once more at the waiting hall. He saw the father and son walking hand in hand to a bench. The antagonist, head lowered, appeared to be helping an elderly lady with her luggage. And that was the best reward for Keanu, watching how one small act could spark a chain of positive changes. When the train started moving, Keanu took a seat by the window and allowed himself to reflect on all that had just happened. He even smiled, thinking how he'd remained unrecognized by many until that woman stepped in. And that was all right, better to be known for one's actions rather than for one's name. His eyes shone with quiet joy. Some might say he had taught a lesson, others might post a phone recording online. But it wasn't about that. What mattered was that the little boy no longer felt humiliated, his father saw there was support in the world, and the antagonist got a chance to reassess his behavior. As the train rumbled on, Keanu recalled his own hardships, past losses, and suffering that taught him to appreciate simple human kindness and never ignore someone else's misfortune. If just one witness of this scene reflected on how vital it is to show courtesy and compassion, then it was all worth it. Final moral and conclusion. The story in the waiting hall ended quietly, without fanfare or standing ovations. But in the hearts of those who witnessed it, a lasting impression remained, both kind and inspiring. The young boy learned an important lesson: even if the world can seem cruel, a single act of goodness can alter the course of events. The father realized that his sense of helplessness could be overcome by a simple, caring gesture from a stranger. The antagonist, feeling shame and remorse, gained a valuable opportunity to examine his own life and stop unloading his frustrations on innocent people. All of this happened because Keanu Reeves stepped in with a humble act of compassion. Some might argue that one act is not enough to change the whole world. But it's precisely the chain of such small, consistent steps that creates a greater movement of kindness. Each of us can be part of that chain if we don't ignore others' pain and aren't afraid to speak up for what's right. Friends, always remember, even a single gesture of caring can be a ray of light in someone's dark moment. Maybe while waiting in line, crossing the street, or just being around people, you'll encounter a similar situation. Don't walk away. Perhaps your calm, gentle voice will be the turning point that changes someone's life. Thank you for watching, or reading, this story to the end. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so now. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced injustice? How did you feel and what did you do? Your experience may inspire others. And never forget that even the smallest act of kindness can start a wave of warmth and light. And as Keanu himself said, we cannot control the behavior of those around us, but we can choose how we respond to it. And the simplest choice is to answer with kindness.